again, we have some people joining us, and I'm sure there are going to be more joining right around 8 o'clock. We tend to get quite a few people joining us. Uh, Good evening, everybody. It's the Sunday night webinar. We're September 29th, and I'm Gene Clabago.
I'm Roger Carroll.
And we want to welcome you. And tonight we have as our special guest, Mr. Corella, who's going to speak with us. And I guess with no further ado, I'm going to now change the presenter. I'm hoping I'm going to change the presenter to Mr. Corella. And Mr. Corella?
And before we start, I just remind people if they do have a comment or a question,
oh yes,
you can raise your hand on the dashboard or send us a chat message in the background, and we will then relay what you're asking or your comment to the presenter.
Okay. And again, Mr. Corella, you may have to minimize. I've sent the change presenter thing. You'll have to see that again.
Okay.
So, however you.
So I hit show my screen again?
Yes, show your screen. And your screen is being shown.
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay. It is,
well,
yes.
Just interrupt me if it fails or if I'm not moving the slides along or whatever.
Well, everything's fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you both very much. Thanks for asking me back again. I want to say good evening to everybody out there. I hope, let's see. I'm not able to get my slides to advance here. Let me see. Oh, I see. I'm just going to have to use. I have a shared screen here. I have a monitor, and I have my home laptop here. So let's see if this works.
Yes.
There we go. Perfect. Okay. Well, folks, I thought I would share a couple of things that are pertinent that are going on right about now. So hopefully I'll have time for each of them, and I'll have some time to answer your questions too. So the first thing I thought I'd do is introduce some new staff in the curriculum office. We have had some big changes over the summer. Ed Ventry, who I work with for the past 2 years, he started as my intern when he was getting his administrative degree, and then he worked in my office, and I did a fantastic job. But I'm so happy for him. He's been promoted to an assistant principal at Niagara Falls High School. And Brian Rotella, another talented guy who I got to work with this past year, is now off as a dean of students at Kalfas Magnet School. So I have a whole new staff. For a few days there, it was back to just Kathy Sullivan and I, which is where we started 5 years ago. And so now we have some new staff, and I'll introduce them, and I'll show you what each of them is working on along with me, because usually we tend to associate different folks in central office with different topics, and as those change, I want to get that information out. A large part of my spring and summer, well, actually my entire school year, has to do with making sure that our school improvement efforts are moving forward. That is particularly important because our current accountability status is TSI, or Targeted Support and Intervention. You probably remember when we were a focus district and we had 7 focus schools. The good news is that the status of many of our schools improved so much that they're now in good standing. So currently what we have is 3 targeted support and improvement schools. That's the new term under ESSA that was formerly known as FOCUS. So we have fewer schools, but we still have similar requirements. And because we have at least 1 school in improvement status, then we as a district are also in improvement status. So we are a TSI district with 3 TSI schools. So we're required to have a district strategic plan, and I thought I would share that with you. I've been meeting with some groups over the past month or so, and everywhere I go, I try to mention it. certainly our administrators and school leadership are very aware of it, but I think it's good to have the district as a whole know what we're working on, and hopefully folks will see the parallels between what's going on in their schools and the initiatives there and how they're being driven by the district. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the elementary coaches service model, which I changed this year. So it's quite a big change. And so as we're all getting used to it, I want to describe it a little bit. I want to also talk about our career and technical education initiative that Mr. Laurie has talked about quite a bit. And he charged myself and Brian Rotella with leading that last fall. And we made quite a bit of progress this year. And the changes, or the more immediate changes that are taking place for the coming year are really happening at the prep school level, grades 7 and 8. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then if I have time, I'll talk a little bit about the adoption of the New York State Science Learning Standards, which are being phased in. And we're going into phase 2 of that adoption. So I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that. Let's see if I can get my next slide to move. Okay, let's see. Well, it doesn't seem to want to move. Let me try it again. Well, I'm sorry, folks, but my slide does not want to move. Oh, I think I got it. Okay, now I went too far. Here we go. All right, this is what I wanted to show. So you can see right over to the right, Kathy Sullivan continues to work with me in the curriculum office, and we have 3 new people this year. Leah Baldessari, John Briglio, and Tom Fisher. All of them I've actually worked with previously. Leah was a teacher at LaSalle Middle School when I was the principal there for a few years. And John Briglio was our Dean of Students. He was the Dean of Students there for a very long time. I believe he came to work at LaSalle in 2006, I believe. And when I first went to LaSalle as the principal, Tom Fisher was a social studies teacher. So I know Tom very well. So it's a pleasure to have all of them working with me along with Kathy. So taking a look here, this is the organizational chart that we've been using as we've been transitioning. And I just highlighted in red some of the areas that might be of interest to folks listening tonight. Leah Baldessari is our liaison for art and music, which we are working on incrementally phasing in new standards for those areas. Business, English language arts at the secondary level, the enrichment and accelerated programs, or the CAP program, and world languages, which is the new term that the state is using for foreign language or LOT, languages other than English, that we've that we teach in our district. In our district, currently, we teach just Spanish. John is our liaison for phys ed and health, prep level family consumer science and technology, and mathematics and science. And Tom is taking over where Stan Wooten and Brian Rotella left off with the healthy behaviors programming. We also have some new mental health education mandates. Brian did quite a bit of work on that last year, and so Tom is going to be the liaison for that this year. The same is true with school counseling plans. District and school plans are required, and so we'll be working on those. Those are a work in progress. And as I mentioned, Tom is a social studies teacher, so he'll be our liaison for social studies. And Kathy is continuing to work on the areas that her role has expanded quite a bit with our recent grants. We received 2 additional pre-kindergarten grants within the last 3 years. So that has taken up a large portion of her job, along with English Language Arts kindergarten to grade 5. We've also added reading recovery and the early literacy training programs to Kathy's oversight. And she's, of course, is still the coordinator for PEP, or the Primary Enrichment Program, our RTI state-mandated AIS for grades K to 4 in literacy. And she works with our special classes at the elementary level, our 15-to-1 classes and our 12-1-1 classes on English Language Arts. A committee of teachers over the last couple of years has been meeting to look at different curriculum resources that might be both differentiated and work well with their student population. So a few years ago, they chose the REACH program, which has some similarities to Journeys, but there are some significant differences. It's a program meant to be used for English Language Arts for either students with learning disabilities and or ELs, or students who are new to English. And as I said, she's our UPK coordinator and does everything with the assessment, the curriculum, and all the grant writing that goes along with that. So on to our school improvement plan, or our district improvement plan. We call this the DSIP for short, District Comprehensive Improvement Plan. This is a requirement. We have to have a leadership team in our central office that reviews district data, goes through a process that documents looking at our needs. We, for example, besides looking at district data, we also spend quite a bit of time looking at the stakeholder surveys that we've been administering for the past 3 to 4 years. If you're a teacher in our district, you undoubtedly took the SPS, or the School Performance Scan. That's a survey that is quite lengthy, but it covers all areas of the organization, from culture to curriculum to teacher decision-making and actions. It also includes questions on parent involvement and SEL, or student social and emotional learning. Students take a survey as well as parents. So we have quite a bit of data based on that. And for the first time this year, we trimmed the questions down in the overall survey. In particular, the SPS was very lengthy. So we trimmed some of the questions down, and we added some questions on student emotional learning and health. That is a large emphasis that State Ed has been working with districts on, and soon, I'm not sure exactly when, perhaps in a year, we're going to be mandated to give every year some type of SEL survey to our stakeholders. The State Ed Department is looking at using a federal education department version of this, of a similar assessment. One of the reasons that they like it is because there's no cost associated with it. I don't know a lot about it at this point. I know it's quite lengthy, but what we decided to do this year, though, is we simply took from the creator of the current stakeholder surveys that we use. They came up with an 88 question bank that concentrated on SEL, and so I picked 20 questions from that I thought were pertinent, that we would want to have data on, and those 20 questions were folded into each version of the survey. So there was a student version, a parent version, and a teacher or school staff member version of each question. So that's what we do. And then we have to create a plan. And the plan is a little bit different from the SEPs. I'll bet a lot of you have seen your school comprehensive education plan, or what we call an SEP for short. All of our plans are based on the DTSTE rubric. It's a very broad diagnostic rubric that addresses all areas of school and district functioning. And this year, the schools had some nice flexibility. They did not have to write or have a goal and an action plan that matched every part of the rubric. They were able to make some choices based on the priorities that they had determined as a school leadership team, which is great flexibility for them. Unfortunately, we didn't have the same flexibility for our district plan. What we needed to do was write a goal and have an action plan for each of the 6 parts. So those parts or components are called tenets. Tenet 1, which is on the screen now, is systems and organizations. And then Tenet 2 is district and school leadership. Tenet 3 is curriculum. 4 is practice and pedagogy. 5 is student social emotional health. And Tenet 6 is parent involvement. So we have a goal for each of these. What we really tried to do this year is make sure that our goals were interrelated, so that each tenet's plan wasn't siloed. When that happens, often it becomes really burdensome and difficult to do each plan justice. So what you're going to see as we go through this is a lot of the tenets are paired, and so what is happening in one mirrors what's happening in the other, and it's kind of I would say 2 sides of the same coin. So what you see on the screen is our SMART goal, and I'm not going to read that to you, but it follows. For those of you again who have worked on your SEPs, SMART goals follow a definite formula. They have to be. They usually begin by saying when you want to accomplish the goal. They have to be actionable. They have to be measurable. They have to be timely. So here, there are several different pieces of the organizational rubric that we could pick from. We decided that what we wanted to do was monitor and support the implementation of each school's plan probably more carefully than we had in the past. So what I've got on some of these slides here after each goal is simply some of the highlights of the action steps. It certainly isn't every action step. The plan is a bit lengthy, but I just wanted to give some of the highlights, or I guess you would say the gist of each tenet's action steps. So here for Tenet 1, when our goal was to monitor and support the implementation of each school's SEP, the first bullet here is we're having quarterly SEP review meetings. So each principal has been scheduled to come to Mark's weekly, or Mr. Laurie's weekly cabinet meeting. It's called the Evolution Team. It includes folks from curriculum assessment, finance, maintenance, every department within the district, and we meet every Wednesday morning and follow an agenda that Joe Girizzo sets and brings us through. And so our DSIP is always on that agenda, but usually instead of my just reporting out, each principal is going to come a minimum of 3 times throughout the year to first share in detail the actions that are in their SEP plan, and then talk about what they've accomplished and what some of the challenges they've had or encountered would be, and where they think they need to go next. We have Calphus Magnet started us off this year, and then we're going to be hearing from Gaskill this Wednesday. You can see the rest of, I'm not going to read all of those there. We also have some folks who work with us in our Leverage Leadership program, and who are also facilitating our Foundational 5 professional development training, which I'll talk a little bit about later. From that same organization, we've engaged a couple of consultants that will be working with our 3 TSI principals and coming to the buildings and working with them on monitoring their SEPs, revising them if necessary, troubleshooting different pieces of them throughout the year. We're also looking at coming up with a uniform data dashboard so that we can quickly see at a glance how each of our schools are doing as far as meeting the goals that are in the DSIP. So we've talked about using different tools such as Office 365 to enable all of our schools to put their data, maybe perhaps on a monthly basis, into one repository, so we can quickly check throughout the year rather than being surprised by a trend which we don't notice until the end of the year. We want to get away from that, and we want to be working in a much more free-flowing manner. And we're also going to take a look at our principals have been using a Google document to give teachers actionable feedback when they're visiting classes. We're looking at using some different software that will be a little bit more functional, that will keep data a little bit better, that will be a little bit friendlier for both teachers and administrators to use. So we're looking at new technology tools. Our second tenet is school leadership, and our SMART goal is a pretty simple one. We were a little bit troubled by our suspension data. So what we're looking here at is the number of our district suspensions of 5 days or greater. We would like to reduce in this school year by 20% compared to the 18-19 school year. So what are we doing in order to make that happen? Well, we have currently we've got all of our pre-kindergarten teachers trained in a 3-tiered behavior intervention model known as the pyramid model. It is endorsed by the New York State Education Department, and we first heard about it about 2 years ago at the kindergarten summit at Niagara University. The speaker there has actually become the trainer that has visited Niagara Falls and has begun training our primary teachers. Her name is Marilyn Ballard, and she's a really gifted early childhood person. And so the program basically, if you're familiar with RTI, is a 3-tiered system of supports. And the first tier is all about classroom environment and interaction with all students, and how do we structure our environments for our youngest kids in ways that supports their learning and supports their social development, and also teaches and lends itself well to appropriate school behaviors. And a lot of our kids, it's not unusual for 3- and 4-year-olds to have trouble functioning in such a different social setting from their home. when they're away from their parents and siblings. So we need to be a little more, cognizant of how we overtly teach students correct behaviors and social strategies and interactions. So that's tier 1. Tier 2 is a system of supports for students who are more, just need a little bit more assistance to develop their and function well, to develop school appropriate behaviors. And tier 3, just like it is with literacy, deals with students who are really having issues functioning and gets right down to behavior interventions that are very hands-on, consistent, and monitored. So what we began doing the year before last is training our pre-kindergarten teachers. And currently, as of right now, all of our pre-K3 and pre-K4 teachers are trained. Then this summer, we began training our kindergarten teachers. So we have, I believe, about 11 or 12 of our kindergarten teachers trained. We are going to train the rest of the kindergarten teachers on superintendent's conference days throughout this year. And then also, in order to make it work well, teachers and their administrators and deans and social workers need to be on the same page, and they need to share this knowledge base. So over the next 2 months, we're going to be training all of the principals, deans, and social workers so that the pre-K and K teachers and those folks are all on the same page. We've also been looking at developing consistent procedures and policies for everything from attendance to behavior interventions for our very youngest kids at the pre-K level. So this summer and into September, our pre-K folks worked on taking everything that they learned in the pyramid training and condensing it into guidance for our district. And it also includes, for example, some forms and some record keeping and behavior documentation documents that everyone agreed we would use consistently throughout the district. We're also looking at defining alternatives to suspension. A lot of our schools are very interested in using pieces of restorative justice practices. That really isn't new. Some of our schools have been looking at it for up to 2 years. So what we're trying to do as a district is support all of our schools that want to go in that direction as far as training and anything else that they might need. And tenets 3 and 4 definitely go together. I mentioned earlier that's curriculum and practice. So what we're doing here is a lot of you have probably heard of the Foundational 5 training, and maybe some of the folks that are listening tonight have gone through the first 2 modules of that training. That is, it's based around 5 key instructional practices that research has shown are likely, or actually proven to affect student results in a positive manner. The first is learning targets. The second is student engagement. The third is checking for understanding. The fourth is complex questioning. And the fifth is differentiated instruction in practice. That's nothing new to all of us. And when we began our journey as a district needing improvement in 2016, we began to narrow in or hone in on those strategies. And we offered training in different schools. But what was happening was that I was finding that we didn't have a common level of understanding among all of our schools. And so I felt obligated to do something about that. So I looked at this particular program that was being piloted and last school year, and it was made available to us beginning in August. So we made it one of the centerpieces of our plan. And the way that it's working is we have in-depth full-day trainings on those topics, and that's the first part of it. So I posted for interested teachers, and I wanted representatives from each building. We had 53 teachers that were selected. We had quite a good response. I would say over 70 teachers responded, and originally I had posted for just 45, and that's what I had budgeted for. But because we had such interest, I wanted to add a few more teachers, so I was able to find some more grant funds, and I think we had 53 or 54 teachers who were trained this summer on the first two modules, and the final two modules we are training during this fall. In fact, yesterday, Saturday the 28th, was the first session for complex questioning. And then our next one is coming up in October. So half of the folks from the cohort were trained yesterday. The other half will be in October. And then the final module, differentiated instruction and practice, our folks are splitting into two groups, and we'll have some trained in late November and the rest in early December. So once that's done, then we're going to ask those folks that have been trained whether or not they're interested in going to the second phase, which is becoming turnkey trainers. So the goal here is to build capacity across schools so that every school has what we would consider expert lead teachers that are fluent with those instructional strategies. And they, in turn, can coach and mentor teachers in their building. They can provide professional development on superintendent's conference days for their faculties, or in department meetings for their faculties, so that we're kind of building our own. We're going to build this cadre of highly skilled folks, and they're not going to be. Some of them are going to be instructional coaches, but not all instructional coaches. We want to go beyond that cohort of people and develop lead teachers that are practicing in the classroom. So that is our main goal for Tenet 3. And then what they're going to be doing, about 15 to 18 of them hopefully will be interested, and then of going further. And in the spring, they're going to get more training that basically has to do with how do you coach your peers, how do you become a lead teacher. So there's a little bit of professional development strategies for adults, as well as coaching and mentoring strategies. And the folks that run the program will actually work with our turnkey trainers, and they will coach them as they are providing professional development. So when they're going to, let's say, facilitate their first department meeting or do a training on a professional development day, they'll have their trainers there in the room with them from the Foundational 5 program, helping them as not only plan, but giving them feedback as they're working with their peers. So it kind of brings teacher-led professional development to the next level. And then related to that is Tenet 4. So what we want to do here is take the folks that are highly trained in the Foundational 5 and begin a teacher-led learning walk protocol. And that basically is a format where teachers volunteer to be host instructors, and other teachers from their school, usually when we start, it would be novice teachers, would go in and watch a master teacher teach. And they would be looking for certain strategies. For example, checking for understanding during a lesson. We would have 2 to 3 teachers that would be visiting the master teacher. We would share their lesson goals so that the visiting teachers knew what to look for. The visiting teachers would then observe and watch the teacher at work, and then afterward, with their principal or myself or the host teacher, they would debrief, talk about what they saw, talk about what they would like to take away and use in their own classroom. So again, it's moving the ball forward with teacher-led professional development, and that's another aspect that we want to get into this year. So our goal is to have every school by the end of the year try this protocol once with novice teachers and the folks that are trained from the Foundational 5. Then I'd like to grow it out in coming years, because I think one of the things we could all agree on is that teachers learn best from each other. We've had a lot of great training with very knowledgeable consultants, and there's certainly a place for that, and that's certainly needed, and we'll continue to do it. But there's also a lot to be said for the power of one teacher demonstrating something, a strategy or a particular lesson to another teacher. That peer-to-peer credibility is really important. And then our social emotional learning tenet, which is tenet 5, we are going to create. In fact, I have a meeting coming up this week. We're going to create a district-wide task force that includes reps from every school that is going to work on making a district plan for supporting social and emotional learning across the district, as well as addressing student attendance or chronic absenteeism needs. I'm sure most of you have heard that chronic absenteeism is now a measure that is included in our school's accountability formula, and that's part of the ESSA law. And the criteria is pretty stringent. A student's considered chronically absent if they've missed 10 or more days. And this past year, I think Mr. Laurie mentioned it when he was your guest a few weeks ago. We had last year, I believe, overall, we had a little over 30% of our students that fell into that category district-wide. So we need to address these issues, and again, one of the things that we have to do as a district is make sure that all of our schools participate and pay attention to student social emotional learning and are supported in their efforts to combat chronic absenteeism. So we have here a goal that's quantifiable, and it's related to, or it's going to be measured in part by our stakeholder survey responses. So what it's going to include is a panel of people district-wide. We're going to take a look at and collect data regularly. We'll be looking at specifically 2 things, as I mentioned. One is chronic absenteeism, but the other is looking at minimizing disruptive student behavior. We consistently see that as a concern, or that issue as a concern that's reported by not so much parents, but teachers and students in our survey data, that they feel that occasionally they lose teaching and learning time due to disruptive or other off-task behaviors. So we need to address those head on. One of the things that we're looking at is piloting universal behavior screening. We, of course, screen all of our students for their literacy development. That's a state mandate as part of the RTI mandate. But many screening tools will also screen students to identify whether they're at risk for disruptive behavior or other behaviors that will get in the way of their learning. And so we're going to look at piloting that at one of our schools to see how much time it takes. Is it doable? Is it helpful? Does the data that we get help our START teams make better plans for students? These are things that we would like, or questions that we'd like to explore. Then we don't want to forget I think it's Covey that calls it sharpening the saw. You know, there's some literature out there about how do we go about keeping ourselves as adults healthy and mentally and emotionally well when our jobs can be draining and really taxing. So we're going to take a look at some SEL routines for adults as well. And then finally, our last tenet is parent and community engagement. So what we've got here is we're going to be looking at a series of parent outreach activities that concentrate solely on the message of how important it is for our students to attend regularly. Our data is really clear on what we need to improve in that area. There's a lot of data that supports and links student achievement and dropout rates to the number of days students miss of school per year, as well as it even drills down to how many days students miss in the beginning of the year. That sets the pattern for the year. And so we want to put some good effort and focus on that. And really that really demands that we step up our outreach to parents. So enough on school improvement planning. I want to talk a little bit about our career and technical ed initiative. And I know that you have heard a lot from Mr. Laurie about this. And he has a very strong vision that he wants us to enact, where we want to be able to acknowledge that not all of our students are going to be heading to college, and that many of them have an interest and an affinity for different trades. Mr. Laurie meets a lot with different councils around Western New York, labor councils and others in industry and manufacturing, and they talk to him all the time about the shortage of skilled workers and what school systems like ours can do to promote skilled trades. So he's very committed to doing that. And ideally, what he would like us to have is a program that's in district that doesn't repeat or conflict with what's done at Orleans Niagara BOCES, but something that complements it. There are certain programs that are currently run out at BOCES that we would not want to duplicate in our district for a lot of reasons, but there are others that we would like to differentiate and develop here in our city that meet the needs of the industries that we have here in the Falls, and we would like to be able to offer that kind of programming here so that our students don't have to leave and go all the way out to BOCES, which causes scheduling and some calendar headaches. So we'd like to try to minimize that and better develop what we have in-house, and we want to do that in partnership with local businesses that so that they can tell us what they need and the kind of skills that we would like to develop in our students. Along with that, what the state education department wants to make sure that we do is our programming should also, if it's going to be aidable, include a college prep or both a school to work and a college prep track. So what we're looking at is combining and building out what we currently have in our STEM and engineering programming. So we want to further develop that and come up with even more courses and opportunities for kids who would like a STEM career over and above the opportunities that we already have for them, as well as building in trades and making it taking advantage of some crossover between the two of them. So Mr. Laurie is looking at things like building extra facilities. He's talked about all of that, but what I'll talk about here is one of the tasks that he gave the advisory committee that Brian and I set up and facilitated this past school year was he wanted to make sure that when our students were entering their upper class grades at Niagara Falls High School, they had room in their schedule to actually access these courses. Currently, a lot of our kids are scrambling to get their 22 credits to graduate, and we could have all of these wonderful extra courses, but if they are still working on mandated requirements, they won't have time to actually access them. So there are a couple of things that we've done at the prep level to make that happen. I should mention that the CTE steering committee is an ongoing process, and we are starting up our second year. I believe the date we picked is October 29th. We're going to have our kickoff meeting where we have our full steering committee that includes a variety of different folks from both the prep and the high school level. What we did last year is we started as one cohesive group, and then toward the late spring we split off into two planning groups. Those for high school, because the actual boots on the ground for that program is still a few years off. But I worked with a prep school only subcommittee because what we need to do right now is get ready, because our kids that are currently in 7th and 8th grade are the ones that will be accessing these new courses and pathways in their junior and senior year. So we needed to make changes immediately. So some of those changes that are taking place now, working backward from the superintendent's vision, is I think he talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We have all of our students in 8th grade currently taking Algebra 1 in lieu of 8th grade math, and they're taking living environment in lieu of 8th grade science. So that's a pretty bold experiment. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to be collecting data throughout the year. We've been meeting with the teachers. We worked on the curriculum this summer, so we know that we have everything, that our teachers have everything that they need, as well as they have a map. We've differentiated our courses in 8th grade in algebra so that we've got two different, I don't want to say tracks, but we've got two different groups of algebra students. Those that we needed to build in some extra objectives because they were not accelerated in 7th grade. So we want to be careful with how we launch students into algebra when they were not accelerated in grade 7. And then we also have a slightly differentiated course map for kids who were accelerated last year and are ready to blow the doors off of Algebra 1. We're doing the same thing this year with science in that we've built up our grade 7 curriculum so that next year we will have our kids prepared for a living environment. We've been slowly over the past couple of years accelerating more and more students in science in 8th grade, and our pass rates have been quite good when our students have sat for the living environment regents at the end of 8th grade. So we have confidence that that trend will continue. So that's what we're doing to give kids 2 credits in their pocket when they leave 8th grade. We're also looking at our family consumer science courses and our prep level 8th grade technology course. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what we've done there. We've got, let me see, I think I'm going to go to the next slide here. There we go. We wanted to make sure that we had a stronger STEM focus in technology, and also that we began to move away from a more traditional family consumer science, or what some of us might have experienced as home economics, and gone more into some of the fields that will lend themselves well to business and careers. So these are all related to the standards, but a few years ago, the state education department gave districts more leeway in how we plan our middle school CTE courses. There's a statewide, or actually nationwide, shortage of technology teachers and family consumer science teachers. And so what they basically said to us is kids can get their 1 3/4 credits in CTE a variety of different ways. And we now have the leeway of using different CTE certified teachers, such as business teachers, to work with kids in the middle level. And we can emphasize different parts of that same set of standards and minimize other parts of it. So what we're doing this year is something that we've never done before for family consumer science. We just hired a new family consumer science teacher who is a business certified teacher. And she has a 1 semester curriculum that emphasizes career exploration and financial literacy. And she is going to teach it at both prep schools. Currently, she's at LaSalle, and she's going to teach all of the 7th graders over this first semester her course, or her half of the family consumer science course. While at Gaskill, our teacher, Mrs. Dean, who's been with us for a few years, she is teaching the more traditional family consumer science, the home economics piece. We've also reworked that curriculum, though, so it has more of a STEM focus, and we're talking about topics with kids that are pertinent to health, as well as nutrition and the environment. And so I'll explain that a little bit more, perhaps in a future webinar. But we've worked on those 2 curricular areas, and we're having the teachers actually move between the buildings, which is something we've never done before. So each is going to become expert in 1 semester of that full year course. And then in technology, we made some big changes. We made a significant investment in some new units from WazU, which is the creator of Apple, I believe, is Mr. Wozniak. He has an education arm called WozEd, and we first heard about that and some of the curriculum that they offered earlier in the school year. So we invited them to come to our technology committee, and we took a look, and I knew instantly that some of the curriculum that they had is just what we were looking for and had been talking about in our CTE steering committee. So what we've done is, in order to build in training for our teachers, we reworked our technology course, and we've divided it into 4 sections. The first section is the teachers are teaching an engineering unit and bridge building unit, which is something that they've done before. So we're starting with a familiar piece of curriculum for them. And then in the meantime, over these 10 weeks, we're training them along with people from WozEd to implement 3 brand new units that will take them through the rest of the year. And those are listed here on the slide. 3D printing and design, communication and coding. They're going to be using some Spherobots, which some of our 6th grade students already have a little bit of experience with. So that we own, I want to say, about a dozen Spherobots, and Ronnie McGrath, our elementary STEM coach, has worked with different 6th grade teachers and students with an introduction to coding using those, but this unit brings it a little bit further. And then our final unit is going to be drone building and piloting. So what we're hoping to do here is, pique kids' interest in real STEM fields, and get them thinking about things that they might like to explore as they get a bit older and as they start to form their opinions about future careers. So we're really looking forward to that. And Mark has been very supportive as far as resources and helping us get these new units and all the materials that are necessary for them. Let's see if I can get to the next slide here. Okay. Yep. That doesn't seem to want to advance again. Let's see. I'm going to keep trying here, and while I'm going to, luckily I have some notes here, so I'll just go ahead and talk a little bit about the new elementary coach model. What we had been looking at last year when we began to talk about this was that we had each coach, we have 4 elementary math coaches and 4 elementary literacy coaches, each service 2 buildings. And as we've had fewer and fewer substitutes available to us, we've kind of lost the ability to have grade level meetings via teacher release, which we really relied on. And we had gotten a lot of communication and information to our teachers that way, and all of a sudden that just dried up. So it became very challenging for our coaches to be able to find time to work with teachers and for teachers to find time to tap into their coaches. So what we began to think about was, how can we make this model a little more flexible? So basically what we have, and I can see that I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna just end it there and finish up really, really quickly. The coaches are no longer assigned to a school. They work in and among all district elementary schools. They're assigned to particular grade levels, and they are working on professional development. grade level department meetings, and also principal meetings along with me and principal trainings throughout the district. So we are continuing to concentrate the first 6 weeks here on our brand new teachers. So another trend in our district is that we have this year over 30 new elementary teachers, and we're going to continue to have more every year. So one aspect of being tied to a building that was challenging for our coaches is that some coaches had a lot of new teachers who needed support, while others had relatively few. So we wanted to level that playing field. So each of the coaches is assigned to one or more grade levels. We created a team in Microsoft Office, one for the math coaches and one for the ELA coaches. And each of the coaches has a request form that they created in Microsoft Forms. And using that form, teachers throughout the district can contact them, ask them for certain things, invite them into their classrooms. Then the coaches put the teachers on their calendars. And so far, it's working really, really well. I'm very pleased with how the first month has gone. So one quick thing that I wanted to mention before we sign off is that we emailed links to the teams and the forms out to teachers, but we know that things like that can be hard to find in your email after time. So we're over the next week, we should be able to launch a landing page in Lotus Notes, forms, documents, and procedures, and we're going to be using that place where a lot of our teachers are used to going as a landing page for all the links for all the coaches. So it'll have some background information. Diane Spicone is working on setting it up now, and it will direct teachers of certain grade levels right to the ELA and math coaches that can help them, and will provide the links right to the forums where they can communicate with them. So with that, I think it's a little after 9, so I think I'm done, folks.
Well, we had a couple of questions and comments,
Sure.
Rick, that we'll relay them to you in the follow-up survey. Some of them are general in nature, and I responded in the background that that's going to be the case. So you can respond either directly.
Oh, I'm sorry. You should have. Yeah, you should have interrupted me.
Well, you were on a roll. The follow-up survey will be coming via email to everybody in attendance tonight, and once people have responded to that, we will compile that and get that to you as well. And it looks like we've got obviously more things to cover, and we can certainly do this again anytime as a follow-up, as you revisit some of these things as we progress through the school year as well.
Sure. Maybe maybe in the second semester we'll touch base again.
Yeah. As a plan comes to fruition.
There we go.
See where we are. Gene, anything?
No, thank you. No, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Corella, for joining us. Been really informative. And again, as Raj said, if you have any questions or concerns, people who have been watching, please put them into the survey that you'll be getting in about an hour. Thank you email has it. And with that, if there's nothing else, we'll say goodnight to everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Yes, have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Good night.